Good afternoon, everyone. Just getting started for today's webinar. We've got a lot of people who've registered, way over 100 when I looked last night. So hopefully we'll get a good turnout today. We've got people attending from all over, from the States, from Europe, from out east. And very happy to see you all. I'm just going to give it a couple of minutes for people to join, and then we'll get going properly. Very happy to see some familiar friends here. See quite a large contingent from Epson. Microsoft, of course. Mr. Tressler, very nice to see you. That's it's fairly early in the day for you. And a lot of my friends from higher ed too. Okay, so let's make a start here. We'll get going underway. Anyone who wants to have any questions, make any points, just as usual, just please use the chat or the Q&A, and let's get going. So I'm going to try and run this. I'm going to run this very strictly within the 30-minute boundary that we've set. I want to be respectful of your time. What I'm intending to do is to talk for about 20 minutes or so and leave some time for Q&A. Now, I haven't got a hard stop at half past the hour. I will hang around if there's some discussion to be had. Very often that happens on the webinars, and be very happy to do that, but I will be respectful of people's times. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Greg Jeffries. I'm an owner and director at Visual Displays. I'm a specialist consultant. I consult in everything that we're talking about here, really. And I'm not an AV consultant, he said very clearly. I currently lead VIX's Standards Steering Committee. I've been involved with them ever since they got started. I've been involved with a number of the standards that we'll be referring to today. I'm also working on this co-working on this new standard, user experience design for AV, which I think will be very significant, particularly in hybrid workspaces. And I'm very proud to be involved with LTSMG and the AV user group. And I'm also currently writing a book on what I'm talking about here today, although based on the progress so far, that might be finished sometime in the next decade or so. We have broken my consultancy out into a separate business. It's the very imaginatively titled Greg Jeffries Consulting. But that makes that really speaks to the huge rise in interest for what we're talking about today. I do consult in other areas too, but I have separated that out. So today marks the autumn restart of my webinar series. I'm assuming a certain level of knowledge here, but if anybody needs any at different levels, then the idea about these webinars, it's a kind of a way of introducing myself and my company, companies and what we do. So just ping me. Today is very much just a bit of a catch up and a roundup, and I'm going to dive into more detail in those other 4 or 5 sessions that we've got going here. As I say, if you've got any questions, pop them into the chat and the Q&A, but otherwise, let's get going. So one thing I need to say right up at the very front is that, Microsoft's thought leadership in considering the thing about the whole space and not just the tech and apps run within it, that was kind of real thought leadership. And they provided the campfire around this dialogue. Other platforms are available, but it's Microsoft who've shown the leadership here. And I think we need to acknowledge that. I do work with Microsoft, including the team at the Hive, on various things and displays and so forth, but I'm very much not speaking on their behalf. So any bit of nonsense or something that you don't agree with, it's all down to me. So the thing to say here is that hybrid working in general, I think, has changed the rules in AV forever. Once upon a time, we were given meeting spaces that were kind of a done deal. We had to fit our AV within them, and that was it. But now, with hybrid, if the room configuration, the design doesn't work, then even the best technology can fail. And the way I express it is that I'd say that technology, it's the lubricant, it's not the machine. Machine's the people, it's the meeting and what they need to do within those spaces and their workflows and so forth. So the thought here is to really try and work towards the end in mind. So in my work, what I do is I have to regard the entire room as a completely interdependent system. It needs a really holistic approach. I break it down into this granular approach where I break everything down into manageable sized work pieces. And I use this sort of simple but still effective taxonomy, the way of categorizing the room, and we can add and detail it as needed on a project by project basis. But basically, the core objective here is to be able to define what a good user experience is in measurable performance outcomes. And that's, if you like, a completely vendor agnostic statement. Researching for this and also keeping up to date with everything during the summer, Microsoft have really, Microsoft and their accompanying certified vendors have been making great vaulting steps forward in the whole world of techs and apps and licenses. It's been very hard to keep up. So I've just kind of tried to pull together some useful resources to you. Two things I'm going to highlight here. There are links there, and so that there's something that you can look at afterwards. On other webinars, we sometimes look at the videos, but really not appropriate here. The two things I draw your attention to are that the Hive video, when Microsoft did this kind of first launch back in spring last year, showing the enhanced meeting room and the new space designs, that caused a huge amount of interest. And the webinars I ran around that time created a huge interest. However, they've put out an extended version of that Hive video, which is much longer and has got a lot more detail. And I really commend that you look at that, because it kind of really gives a bit of background to what Microsoft looking to achieve and where the end stops are. I think that one thing that we don't have time to look at today, but that it's not possible to deal with absolutely everything in the space, and there's an element here that's about guidance, but it's not being about too prescriptive. The whole thing with telepresence and Cisco and so forth was a very prescriptive thing, and I feel that Microsoft have been very careful to avoid that, but still trying to give very helpful guidance. It's a difficult path to tread, and I think that I expect as they go through, they will kind of go either side of the path, but still a lot of material has been put out, and there's a massive online resource that is that's on their website, and I'll link through to that. Another thing I'll highlight here, because it's a shameless plug for myself too, is that AV Magazine in the UK has a great big feature on Microsoft Teams Room, a Teams Room special, and I've got quite a long and substantial article which talks around this subject, and a lot more detail and a broader scope than I'm able to cover in an event like today. But AV Magazine, I wrote this piece for Clive and Guy there, and it was whenever I do this writing and research, I always find it really helpful for myself, because it helps me bring up to speed and collect my own thoughts too. So we've come, really quite a long way in a relatively short time. So over on the left there, you can see the original visual that was put out with Jimmy Vaughan's big piece about how to do Teams rooms. And then below that, you can see an early version of the Hive with a 32:9 twin projector display, which thankfully they've moved away from. All sorts of issues there around that, which I wasn't very pleased with. And then moving out to the right-hand side, when we got to, I think it was April or May this year, they went public with that Hive video and showing the what they were calling an enhanced meeting room, but this layout with the front row. Now they started with that, calling it an enhanced meeting room, and now, as of a few weeks ago, it's apparently called a signature Teams rooms. You can go figure there, but I haven't researched this, but as you all know, as a lot of you will know, there's been a lot of movement on Teams room licenses and pro licenses, and my assumption there is that this move to calling the signature Teams rooms sort of helps track that that whole ecosystem that's being developed. So, you know, of all the things that Microsoft have been doing in terms of Teams rooms, Front Row has definitely caused the most consternation of all. A large part of visual displays and my own consulting bandwidth has been involved in helping organizations in one way or another understand and then introduce it. So at one point, Front Row was 21:9. By the way, the thing to say about Front Row, it's only a layout. It's a screen layout, and it just sits within the larger Microsoft Teams ecosystem. But now, as of October, I believe, it's also done in 16:9. The thing to look at there, which I'm going to loop back to in a moment, is that you can see that the content window in the lower 16:9 image is occupying a much larger space and height within the image than the 21:9. But again, Microsoft did this Ignite event a couple of weeks ago, and you can still, by the way, go on the links, I believe, to look at the individual meetings and presentations that they had. But there's a fantastic article as an update about everything that was on there, where that link is on the bottom right, which I'll put out and send out with the materials. That is a really useful roundup, and I do commend that. So there are a lot of changes going on within team spaces, but one thing that is a particular note to me and to everyone is that really there's been a step change to much larger image sizes. We use the DISCAS, Avixa's DISCAS standard to set the image size, but remember, DISCAS is about the minimum and not the maximum size. Now, looping back to the content window, a Teams display is effectively a picture-in-picture. It's a multiple window display, and I think we're going to see a lot of changes to that. And I also suspect that there's going to be more kind of user control with that too. But the thing to remember is that the DISCAS standard, which is about to be updated, I'm actually about to appoint a new chair for the task group that will do the update. But one thing it will have to address is that DISCAS, as it stands, assumes that we're talking about the whole image height. When you use the image, when you use DISCAS to set the image size that you need, you do have to apply it to the content window. And there you can see some numbers, which I won't go into because I'm feeling kind, that apply to the scenario when it's 60% of image height. But so in order to move to these larger image sizes, Microsoft has moved to projection, and you'll see that in the materials. And these are the latest materials from their website, which, as I say, it is a very useful resource to go to. But what you see is that even in a standard meter room, they're showing projectors, but I think they're showing a projector there in free space, just so that it's actually a graphical demonstration of how that space has to be done. Projectors can be hidden away, and if you look at the enhanced meeting space, there you can see that what they are using in the Hive is an Epson projector. That particular projector is the Epson EBPU1006W, that's W for white. We tend to specify them in the range from that up to the 1008, which is an 8,500 lumen, depending on screen size and so forth. That's coupled with a UST lens. But one of the reasons I believe that that Microsoft have been working with Epson, and also it is specified in their bill of materials, is that Epson have produced the firmware and the projector, the BIOS and the projector that you can kick out a 21:9 EDID, so that you can so that it can talk to the compute and be able to connect into that system seamlessly. So it's very much about the move to projection, but it has to be a projection done properly. This is causing a little bit of consternation, as I say, the thought of going to projection, because so many people are so used to seeing the washed out images that you can see on that compare and contrast piece on the top left there. The thing is, it just has to be done properly. And what I've got there is a link to to a case study that we did at Glasgow Uni. Now, although you use DISCAS, really we're just moving to using the largest image size which we think of in terms of a digital canvas. That there is such a thing as gravity. There are sort of physical constraints within the room, and what this graphic here is, it just kind of shows a kind of a fairly typical calculation showing that that in a standard room height of 2.7 meters, that's 9 foot to you, Mr. Tressler. There are you can fit in on 16:9 an image size of around 120 inches, and in 21:9 with front note 148 inches. That's a big subject, but just kind of pointing out the kind of the core issues there. Now, although the front row displayed in the enhanced, the signature meeting rooms, so I've got to learn to say, have these fantastic screens. If you look at the two images here, you'll see that they were taken at different light levels, and using a standard screen type, then you can't achieve the contrast ratio that you need, and that's one thing that we are working on with them to use ambient light rejecting screen material, which is an absolute must in order to achieve the results that you need under normal lighting conditions. There's a whole raft of advanced projection specification tools that we use. I'm running a separate webinar on that. And actually, by the way, all the webinars that we've done so far, they're all available as recordings, and you can request and go back and look at them too. But in terms of a practical specification call to make today, for those people who really who they can't decide whether to go with 21:9 for whatever reason, or they want flexibility and future proofing, then my recommendation is to use as large a 16:9 display as possible, typically around 120 inch, and then you can do the 21:9 as a if you like, a picture-in-picture in that, so that you can accommodate that. And when we were doing this, earlier in the year, we were using an external processor, but now that the Epson projectors have this 21:9 EDID, that kind of takes that bit of complication out of the loop. I'm sure, by the way, other projector manufacturers will follow suit, but that seems to be the way that it's going now. Just another couple of quick points about, the main things that are happening of interest, I think, within the Teams rooms and hybrid spaces, is that what we're seeing here now is a more imaginative use of the camera position. This was the thing I particularly loved about what they did in the Hive in the development of the signature meeting room, is having this little camera. It's Panacast 50, I think, this one. It's a small form factor camera. It's a solid state camera, but you can put it out into free space, even in front of the screen. And this is a very, this one will run and run, but that's a bigger subject that we'll go on to another day. One thing I'd like to be maybe possibly a little bit contentious about is that although Front Row does support twin displays, I'm really not a big fan of it. Remember that DISCAS is predicated on image height. Image size equals image height. And if you have image size that where the people can see right to the back, see the content right to the back of the space, it doesn't really work. And if you track that through, you can see I've put those blue lines that are on axis to the center of the two side-by-side displays. And in a room like that, looking at those screens, the people at the front are blocking the view at the people at the back. Now, I'm making a very general and clunky point here, but and of course there will be occasions when twin displays work, but as I say, I'm really not a fan of it for Front Row. I think having a single unified image, a single digital canvas that will really make a system, you stand a much better chance of making the system future-proof. So standards, Microsoft talk a lot about standards, but standards is a misused word because there needs to be a little bit of rigor about thinking about whether something is a standard, whether it's a best practice, or whether it's just simply a BOM, a bill of materials. And standard refers to something that relates to an image, a level of quality, but it also relates to a norm or a model where you can replicate something, you can standardize something. But in Avixa, we really focus on performance standards, which is describing good user outcomes and experiences in measurable and therefore repeatable metrics, and also in the use of environmental standards. So just to kind of wrap up the information side of the webinar, the use of a holistic approach, I think, is absolutely essential. The entire hybrid space, the room, the furniture, the technology, it's all interdependent. They all react on each other. And so it's very important to understand the individual components and then strategize for each. Use of AV stand is absolutely essential. At the beginning of the pandemic, they were really put to one side, and people have really realizing their mistake there. And then really try and future-proof the spaces so that you have the flexibility as your needs and the workflows develop. Very often, I find that people really don't understand what the workflows are going to be till they actually get in and use these spaces. So you've got to, I think, accommodate that future flexibility that need. Image size, absolutely essential, getting that right. And then thinking in terms of what creates an authentic and natural experience. And you have to think in terms of both the in-person and the remote users, which is very often overlooked, which is how the room self-presents to the outside world. But these are key points, but I hope that when I send the deck out later on, that they will be helpful to you. So we supply these displays at Visual Displays. We design them, we make them, we use fancy lab meters and laser survey tools to audit spaces. We're really heavily invested in this. One thing I really try and emphasize with clients is how important it is to have an evaluation speed. evaluation space, the speed and the pace of change is so rapid that to have an evaluation space is really important, and particularly in being able to see how any space self-presents to other rooms outside, on the other end of the line. But if you can't have an evaluation space, then you need to think in terms of having reference spaces in order to do that. And that's a particular area of specialism at the moment. Like I say, at Visual Displays, we do these visual canvas displays. I think curved screens is going to be an interesting development there, and we're working on that. Just want to give a shout out to the LTSMG. We are sponsors, and the first face-to-face of the new term is going to be in December, and we're looking forward to being there and meeting all of our friends. Now we've got a background in immersive displays, which is how we know how to do these things, and we're still doing that a lot. For those of you end users who are not in the AV user group, I thoroughly recommend that you join that. The members of that, membership's free, I think, get huge value from that. And Owen Ellis, who runs it, a good friend of mine, runs it as a really useful resource for end users. And also any manufacturers who are out there, sponsorship of that is really good value. So Visual Displays, we provide a wide range of services, but really everything that we've talked around on this webinar is there for you. And I hope that you can use any or all of our services, and we work very actively with all parts of the channel. So that's the end of the word from our sponsor, and I'll now have a quick look at the Q&A. Someone has asked if the projector native 21:9. No, that projector is actually a native WUXGA. It has an enhanced mode which works in a kind of simulated but very good 4K mode, which is 16:9, and then the EDID in that will just shutter that down to 21:9. Tom Kerr says that Avocor is coming out with 105-inch 21:9 flat panel display next year. Yes, a whole bunch of people, Tom, do have these displays. The height of them is actually very low, so they're fantastic displays. The ones I have seen, I have to say, but they can't be used in large spaces. Tom Mullins. Tom was former leader of our standards Steerco. And lovely to see you on the call, Tom. Tom's calling out the fact that the bottom of the image on my graphic, thank you, Eagle Eyes Tom, is at 43 degrees, 1.1 meters above finished floor level. That's, Tom says it's lower than he would expect given that camera height needed. Yes, Tom, it is, but I think that is the point, is that if you're going to use these cameras, these solid state cameras, then you can reduce the baseline there. There's a push and pull thing here. But I think the thing is that if you're thinking about these spaces in terms of breaking the fourth wall and making them natural, if you're going to have the thumbnail, thumbnails of people running along the bottom of the screen, then the fact that they kind of disappear down to table height, I think is quite a handy visual cue. But that's a kind of a wider debate, and it's very much work in progress. Colin Firth, a friend from Vis-a-Vis, can you please confirm if content window in a native 21:9 aspect ratio can be adjusted? Okay, so I think I'm understanding your point there, Colin, is that as things stand, I think the content window is around 60 to 70% in 21:9. But that I regard as being a movable feast. I think that's going to change. I don't know. I've got no inside information there, but I think it's safer to work on that basis, which again is why it's such a strong driver. It's such a strong driver to think in terms of having the display as large as you can make it. It's very easy to have a larger display and use less of the image area, but if the display is not big enough to start with, you're never going to stick more stuff on there. Bart Black. Hi, Bart. Hello, Greg. What recommendations can you make regarding acoustical and lighting design training and best practices for VTC and front row space design? Well, Bart, that's one of my specialisms. And if you look for the other webinars, I will be talking about that, because that's very much a part of my consulting practice. Jack at KPMG. Lovely to see you, Jack. How do you see front row working for very large events of 50 plus physical participants? I think that's quite a long answer there, Jack. I think that it's going to depend on the options that are there for screen layout, and if you like the nature of the event. I think in a large event, people are going to be switching in and out of modes. I'm going to so. It's 29 minutes past. I'm going to run on answering questions and open up for any chat if we need. But just to be respectful of your time, I would like to thank everyone for attending. We had a lovely turnout today. If anyone's missed it, they can always get the recording or get the slides from me as well, so that you can get those links. Look out for the other webinars, and I hope to see you on that. And anyone who's jumping off now, I wish you thanks and goodbye. But otherwise, I'm going to get back on with answering the questions. We've got a load of good questions today, and which makes me really happy. So Tobias Bowl says an LED screen can also be an option for 21 to 9. Indeed, it can, Tobias. It really can. I think the thing that I'm looking for with LED screens, and it's a question of when, not whether, is basically a move to 0.9 mil pitch, but also much lower screen spec for much lower luminance. An LED screen with the kind of typical luminances that are possible, up to sort of 6,000 nits, 6,000 candela, are way too much for a meeting space where you only need 200 or 300 candela, typically at the top end. And so when the LED screens get to that point, and we are in discussion with LED manufacturers, I think that would be a really interesting option. So completely agree. So an anonymous attendee has asked if there are any further developments on spatial audio. Okay, how long have you got? I think that is a really interesting question. I think that this is a personal observation. I think the visual side of, in terms of practically what you can get and purchase from vendors, in terms of what you can put in as a system, I think the visual side is probably a bit ahead of the audio side. Microsoft has set the bar high there, because they basically said that they really want people to be able to think, using spatial audio, that the audio is emanating, that if someone speaks on the far left of the screen, that the audio will appear to come from that. There's an awful long way to go within that. I mean, you can imagine organizations, within the same organization, all settling on one particular system or standard so that they can make that work. But speaking logically, unless there's a particular standard, that seems to be something that's on the horizon. Having said that, like I say, things are moving so quickly at the moment, and there really are some incredibly lovely and gorgeous audio systems out there, who can deliver that, who can pick up, have the spatial audio both, if you like, push and pull on pickup and replay. But that's a question of when, whether. But I can't speak to I can't speak individually to that. That's not my area of specialism. And Ronan, lovely to see you over at Meritech. Lovely to see you. And you asked me to speak to a little bit about curved screens. Well, I think that as a UX design principle, if you have a curved table, where you've got the users in that gentle arc. I think that it's much better to have the reciprocal, reciprocity there, where the display matches that, so that it kind of fits that. And I think as the front row screens get larger, then the need for a curved screen is there. It's work in progress. And in terms of how they benefit users, I think that is to be seen. At the moment, things are moving so quickly. I think it's a nice to have rather than a need to have, but I do believe it's coming. And how will you specify it, you ask? Then I think, at the moment, it's just on a case-by-case basis. We've developed, and we're developing IP around the design of this as a kind of an algorithm, because in the end, it's the discast standard also applies to the viewing angles, because you want someone who's at the far left of the table to be able to see other people and content on the far right of the screen. And using a curved screens can help that, but it's a kind of a complex interdependent algorithm there to get that one right. But that's what we do. That's what we do. So an anonymous attendee has asked for what about the setup for larger immersive spaces with maybe 2 rows of 12 to 18 seats? Well, actually, that's something I'm working on at the moment in a couple of places. Now, it's my understanding that at the moment, the algorithms that are driving the solid state cameras, for the most part anyway, are not addressing the second row. That will come. Now, there's one of the things about the front row layout, or these kind of flipped layouts, is the question of how many people you can get around the table. And Microsoft is saying it's typically, I think, sort of 6 to 8 people. That can be pushed or pulled to a certain extent, but to get to 12 to 18, that's definitely about using two rows. Yeah, it makes camera placement. It makes camera placement, even more of an issue. But again, I think for the time being, the answer is about using these or using these smaller form factor solid state cameras in the right place and time. Colin at Vis-a-Vis, great session. Thank you, Colin. It's lovely to have you on the call. Chris Skilton, consultant, moved to a new home, I see. Good to see you too. And Tobias, thank you for your comment. Yes, let's pick up that on a separate thread. Okay, well, I think I've talked myself to a standstill here. We've actually still got 40 odd people on the call, so that's very nice. Thankfully, people have stayed on to share with that. It's really nice to be back doing this again. I have missed doing it, and the feedback that we get from doing these sessions is really, really nice. And it's nice to be speaking to, old friends, existing colleagues, and making new friends and colleagues too. So do look out for the other webinars that are there. Please just ping me with any questions that you've got. You can't cover everything on something like this, but hopefully you get at least 1 or 2 new ideas from these sessions that I run, giving at least my view on that. Yeah, so I'm going to call it a day there. Some really nice comments from people, and you're all very welcome. And if there's any, there are still some coming in, and I will respond to those offline. So thanks again. Hopefully, see you on a future webinar, and looking forward to see you on then. And do remember to put this out for anyone who wants to see the recording. Okay, bye-bye now.